The survivors of Vega Prime didn't just escape. They became soldiers. Men and women who had never held a weapon before now swore to never let another world suffer the same fate. Within weeks, recruitment surged. Humanity's military tripled in size. The war was no longer just about saving captives. It was about destroying the Dominion. And for the first time, the slavers knew fear. Because they hadn't just made humanity angry. They had made them relentless. The ruins of Vega Prime still burned when the vow was made. There, among the shattered cities and the smoldering bodies of millions, humanity changed forever. This was no longer about defense. No longer about survival. This was war. A war that would end with the Orthac Dominion wiped from existence. No more negotiations. No more warnings. No more slavers. The hunt had begun. Humanity had always been an adaptable species, it was why they had spread so fast across the stars. But now, adaptation wasn't enough. They had to evolve. The United Earth Fleet reorganized, stripping away the old rules of engagement. This was no longer a conventional war. This was about hunting, striking, and making sure that every slaver who had ever sold a human ended up in a shallow grave in deep space. Thus, the Phantom Fleet was born. A force unlike anything humanity had ever created before. No fixed bases. The fleet was mobile, moving through deep space corridors, using hidden refueling stations and stolen enemy tech. No official command. Squadrons operated independently, allowing for rapid, unpredictable strikes. No mercy. Every Orthac ship captured was stripped of useful data before being obliterated. No survivors. No prisoners. They had become the monsters that the monsters feared. The Orthac believed they had the advantage. Their empire spanned hundreds of systems, their war fleets were massive, and their slaver rings were deeply entrenched. But they had never fought an enemy like humanity. The Phantom Fleet didn't fight like a conventional military. They fought like predators. The Silent Purge, at the slave auction world of Zulker 9, the Orthac gathered to trade thousands of captives. Under the cover of an asteroid storm, human infiltrators hacked into the planetary defense grid, turning it against its people. Gunships strafed the slavers' halls, orbital defenses shredded their fleets. By the time the dust settled, the entire planet was nothing but ruins and echoes of screams. The Blood Debt, in the lawless asteroid colonies of Drakvar, a notorious slaver lord had built an empire selling human captives to the highest bidder. His operation spanned multiple sectors. In one night, it was erased. Phantom operatives boarded his flagship, executed him and his entire family, and then broadcast the footage to every Dominion-controlled system. The breaking of chains. On Keltor Station, an Orthac stronghold deep in their territory, the unthinkable happened: an uprising. Humans and other enslaved species, armed with weapons smuggled in by Phantom Fleet operatives, turned the station into a war zone. When Orthac reinforcements arrived, they found nothing but the bodies of their people hanging from the docking bays. And a single message, scrawled in alien blood. No more chains. For the first time, the slavers were afraid. Trade routes collapsed. Slaver rings abandoned entire planets, knowing that staying meant death. Military convoys refused to travel alone. Even their warships were being hunted. The Dominion's ruling elite demanded answers. How could a species they once saw as livestock be doing this to them? The Orthac leaders thought they had centuries of power left. They were wrong. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were wiping the slavers from the stars. And now, the Dominion knew the truth. This war had only one possible ending: extinction. The Orthac Dominion had ruled for millennia. They had enslaved thousands of species, crushed countless rebellions, and treated the galaxy as their market of flesh. But now, for the first time in history, they were losing. Not to a rival empire. Not to another slaver race. To humans. To beings they had once considered weak, primitive, and disposable. And the worst part? Humanity wasn't just fighting them. They were exterminating them. Orath Prime was a fortress world. A planet-sized citadel where the Dominion's ruling class lived in opulence and arrogance, believing themselves untouchable. For centuries, it had been a place of celebration where the wealthiest slavers gathered to bid on the most valuable captives. Humans had been one of their most prized commodities. Now, humans had come to collect. The Phantom Fleet didn't launch a standard attack. There were no warnings. No demands. Just a sudden blackout. At once, Orath's planetary grid failed. Communications went silent. Orbital defenses shut down. Then, the bombing began. Kinetic rods rained from orbit, obliterating cities in precise, surgical strikes. Cyber warfare viruses hijacked security systems, turning them against their people. Covert ground teams infiltrated key locations, hunting the Dominion's leaders one by one. There was no escape. The slavers who had once lived in luxury were dragged from their homes, some gunned down in the streets, others burned alive in their palaces. By dawn, Orath Prime was gone. A world that had once been the heart of the slave trade was now a dead rock, burning in the void. And the message was clear. This is what you built. This is how it ends. Across the Dominion, panic spread. For the first time, slavers abandoned their empire. Dominion governors fled their posts. Whole sectors were left undefended as high-ranking officials tried to disappear. Slaver fleets disbanded. Ships once used to transport captives now carried Orthac nobles desperately searching for sanctuary. Corrupt mercenary groups turned against their former masters. Many saw which way the war was heading and decided to sell out their old employers to humanity for a chance to survive. Some of the most powerful Orthac leaders begged for mercy. They offered gold, planets, technology, anything to be spared. Humanity's answer was always the same. You didn't spare us. Then the executions began. The Orthac were crumbling, but they still had one last hope. Their final stronghold, Zirixel, the Dominion's capital world. A planet fortified for centuries. Shielded by an armada of warships, orbital cannons, and planetary defenses that had never been breached. Here, the last rulers of the Dominion gathered. Their final stand. Their last hope. They still believed they could outlast humanity. In the end, their superior numbers and ancient power would break this upstart species. They were wrong. Because humanity had already decided how this would end. Not with peace. Not with surrender. But with extinction. And the Phantom Fleet was already on its way. The Orthac Dominion had ruled for millennia, but in just a few short years, humanity had burned their empire to the ground. Now, only one world remained. Zirixel. A planet fortified for centuries. Shielded by the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. Their last generals, warlords, and slaver kings had gathered here, making their final stand behind layer after layer of defenses. The Orthac believed that if they could hold this planet, if they could outlast humanity's fury, they could rebuild. They were wrong. Because humanity wasn't coming to fight a war. They were coming to an end. The Phantom Fleet was no longer a hidden force. Humanity's war machine had grown beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a storm. When they arrived at Zirixel, they brought everything. Massive dreadnoughts, each armed with planet-cracking weaponry. Stealth squadrons, already inside Orthac space, waiting for the moment to strike. AI-driven assault carriers, remotely piloted, ensuring not a single human life was wasted. They didn't send a warning. They didn't open communications. They simply attacked. The battle was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Wave after wave of human ships struck at the Dominion's defenses, disrupting shield generators, hacking security systems, and shutting down entire battlecruisers before a single shot was fired. But the Orthac fought back. They had spent centuries perfecting war, and they knew this was their final stand. Their warships were huge, their weapons devastating. For hours, the void burned. Thousands of ships were lost. Debris fields are so dense they became floating graveyards. Entire human fleets were wiped from existence in a single barrage. But humanity didn't stop. They never stopped. Because this wasn't just a battle. This was vengeance. While the main fleet hammered the Orthax defenses, an elite strike team was already inside the capital city. Led by former captives, human operatives had infiltrated Zirixel's command network days before the battle even started. Now, as the battle raged above, they activated the final phase. One by one, the Orthax planetary defenses turned against them. Orbital cannons locked onto friendly ships, obliterating their fleets. Security drones switched sides, slaughtering their former masters. Citywide shield generators collapsed, exposing the surface to orbital bombardment. The fortress world that had never been breached was now defenseless. And humanity didn't hesitate. The Orthac leadership, once proud and untouchable, tried to flee. They begged for mercy. They offered to surrender. They promised wealth, knowledge, and entire worlds in exchange for their lives. Humanity answered with fire. Palaces turned to ash. Capitals reduced to rubble. The last warlords, dragged from their bunkers, were executed in the streets. By the end of the siege, Zirixel was gone. Not conquered. Erased. The last planet of the Dominion had become nothing more than dust in the void. And with it, the Orthac species was no more. The galaxy watched in silence. For the first time in history, a slaver empire had not just been defeated but utterly destroyed. The Orthac were not negotiated with. They were not spared. They were exterminated. And the message was clear. No more chains. No more slavers. Ever again. The Orthac dominion was gone. Not defeated. Erased. Once, they had ruled the stars with chains and cruelty, believing themselves untouchable. Now, their worlds were lifeless husks, their fleets nothing more than drifting wreckage. For the first time in history, the slavers had not just lost. They had ceased to exist. And humanity stood alone in the silence of their victory. Across the galaxy, the ruins of the Dominion were ripe for the taking. Former slave worlds abandoned war factories, entire fleets left adrift, it was all there, waiting. But humanity had a choice to make. They had become the most feared force in the galaxy. The species that had hunted the hunters, burned an empire to ash and shown no mercy. Now, the question remained. Would they become something greater? Or would they become something worse? The war had changed humanity. It had united them in a way never seen before. Nations that once fought among themselves had come together with a single purpose: destruction. But with the enemy gone, cracks began to form. Some believed humanity should rebuild, focus on peace, and ensure that nothing like the Orthac Dominion could ever rise again. Others believed power was meant to be wielded. The galaxy had been cruel to humanity, now it was time to reshape it. One truth was undeniable. Humanity had become an empire in all but name. The ships they built, the weapons they forged, the warriors they trained, they could never go back. The only question was what they would become. Not all humans celebrated the victory. For many, the war had been personal. They had lost families, friends, and entire worlds. For them, it wasn't enough that the Orthac were dead. They wanted more. And so, the hunt continued. Rogue Phantom fleet captains, unwilling to disarm, scoured the void for anyone who had once aided the slavers. Black market traders who once sold human lives. Executed. Mercenaries who worked for the Dominion. Hunted down. Governments that turned a blind eye? Given a choice, submit or burn. Humanity had promised vengeance. And for some, the war would never truly be over. The galaxy had watched humanity's rise in fear and awe. Now, they waited to see what would come next. Would humanity become the new masters of the void? Would they lead the way to a new peace? Or had the war forged something far darker? One final message was broadcast to the stars, sent from Earth's high command to every remaining civilization. The age of slavers is over. If you trade in chains, you will burn. If you take the weak, we will take everything from you. There will be no second warnings. No negotiations. No mercy. We are humanity. We do not forgive. We do not forget. The stars are free now. Keep them that way. The war was over. But the echoes of battle still lingered in the void. In the ruins of the Orthac Dominion, silence had taken hold. Once bustling slaver worlds were nothing more than burned-out husks, drifting lifelessly in the cold abyss. Humanity had erased an empire. And the galaxy had taken notice. For centuries, the Galactic Council had tolerated the Orthac. Some out of fear, others out of greed. Now, as the ashes of the Dominion settled, those same civilizations found themselves at a crossroads. Humanity had proven something terrifying, that an empire built on cruelty could be not just defeated, but annihilated. And if the humans had done it once, they could do it again. In hushed chambers and encrypted transmissions, the galaxy debated. Should humanity be welcomed, in hopes of tempering their rage? Should they be feared, their expansion slowed before they became something even more dangerous? Or had humanity become something the galaxy could never control? One thing was clear. The balance of power had shifted. The war had changed humanity. But the Phantom Fleet? They had become something else entirely. What had started as a shadow war against slavers had evolved into a force that answered to no one. Even as Earth's governments debated peace, the remnants of the Phantom Fleet continued their hunt. Mercenary groups who had worked with the Orthac? Wiped out. Are former slaver syndicates trying to rebuild in secret? Erased. Neutral civilizations with ties to the slave trade? Given a choice, submit or burn. The Phantom Fleet wasn't just enforcing peace. They were making sure no one would ever challenge humanity again. Their ships had no insignias. Their soldiers carried no flags. But the message was clear. If you trade in chains, if you prey on the weak, you are already dead. Some whispered that the Phantom Fleet had gone rogue, that they were acting without orders. But the truth? No one stopped them. Because deep down, humanity wasn't ready to let go of the war. The last surviving members of the Dominion had long since been erased. But the final message from Earth's High Command was broadcast to the entire galaxy, to every empire, every colony, every civilization that still clung to the old ways. The age of slavers is over. The stars belong to the free. If you try to bring back the chains, we will come for you. We will hunt you. We will erase you. There will be no second warnings. And for the first time in history, the galaxy truly believed them. Because the last species that had doubted humanity no longer existed. The war was over. The Dominion was no more. But the echoes of humanity's vengeance still rippled across the stars. What came next would define them forever. The galaxy was split. Some saw humanity as liberators. On countless former slave worlds, humans were welcomed as heroes, their fleets were seen as the armada that shattered the chains of tyranny. But others saw them as the next great conquerors. The Phantom Fleet had not stopped hunting. Slaver syndicates, crime lords, and entire planetary governments that had once profited from the Dominion were now targets. Even those who had never held a chain lived in fear. Because humanity had proven one terrifying truth. They did not negotiate. They did not forgive. The Phantom Fleet had once been a whisper in the void. Now, they were something more. They answered to no one, not to Earth's leaders, not to any government. They had become a force beyond control, hunting threats before they could rise. Suspected slaver cells? Eradicated before they could act. Empires that had once turned a blind eye? Pressured into submission. Worlds that hesitated to abandon old ways? Given a choice, comply or disappear. The line between justice and tyranny was beginning to blur. Some called them protectors of the innocent. Others called them executioners without a leash. But the Phantom Fleet didn't care. They had made a promise: no more chains. No more slavers. Ever. And they intended to keep it. Back on Earth, the war had left scars deeper than anyone had imagined. Humanity had become stronger than ever, but the cost had been their innocence. For the first time, the nations of Earth were truly unified, not out of peace, but because they had seen what they could achieve when they had a common enemy. Now, with that enemy gone, the question remained: should humanity rule? Some argued that the only way to ensure galactic peace was to take control, to shape the stars in their image, guiding younger civilizations to prevent another dominion from rising. Should humanity withdraw? Others believed the war had been necessary, but now, it was time to step back, to let the galaxy rebuild, and avoid becoming the very thing they had destroyed. Should humanity remain hunters? A growing faction saw a new purpose: to become the galaxy's enforcers, a force that would watch from the shadows, striking down any threat before it could take root. One thing was certain: humanity would never be the same again. One last transmission was sent from Earth, broadcast to every world, every empire, every being in the galaxy. The slavers are gone. Their empire is dust. This is your chance to build a better future. A future without chains, without cruelty. Do not waste it. And then, a final warning. But know this: if tyranny rises again, we will return. And we will end it. Just like we ended the Orthac. The war was over. But the future was still unwritten. Would humanity become the new rulers of the galaxy? Would they step back, allowing freedom to flourish? Or had they already begun their transformation into the very thing they swore to destroy? One thing was certain: the galaxy will never forget the day humanity stood up. And it would never stop wondering: would they ever put their weapons down? The war was over. The slavers were gone. And humanity stood at the edge of history, gazing into the vast unknown. For the first time, they were truly free. No chains. No masters. No enemies left to fight. But victory did not bring peace, only questions. What came next? What kind of future would they build? The answer would shape the stars for millennia. The stars had always been silent. That was the greatest lie humanity ever believed. For centuries, we looked up, imagining we were alone, or if life did exist, it was distant, indifferent, maybe even benevolent. We thought ourselves explorers, pioneers of an untamed frontier. But we weren't the first to walk among the stars. We were the prey. It started with whispers. A freighter vanished near the Kuiper Belt, its distress beacon flickering once before going dark. A deep space research station was left abandoned, its crew missing but their belongings untouched, as if they had simply vanished into the void. The disappearances were dismissed: pirates, accidents, the natural dangers of space. Then came the signal. A transmission, barely holding together, intercepted by a lone satellite drifting beyond Neptune's orbit. The voice on the recording was human, but filled with terror. They took us. They've taken thousands. We are not alone. Find the truth, and burn them down. The message contains something else. Coordinates. Encrypted data. And the truth that shattered everything we thought we knew. Beyond our solar system, hidden within the dark corridors of a galactic underworld, humanity had already been discovered, not as equals, not as allies, but as cargo. We were being hunted, and stolen in the night, our people sold to the highest bidder in markets that stretched across the stars. The slavers thought Earth was still blind. That we wouldn't notice. That we would remain docile, like so many others before us. They were wrong. When the truth came to light, the reaction was swift and merciless. The old rivalries of Earth, nations, corporations, underground factions all crumbled beneath a singular rage. A new kind of war began, one fought in the silence of space, in the shadows of stolen technology, in the battle cries of those who refused to be shackled. The first attack came like a ghost in the void, a fleet, hidden beneath stolen Orthac Dominion codes, slipping into a slaver station orbiting a dying star. When the slavers realized their deception, it was too late. The humans fought like no species had before, relentless, brutal, unyielding. The captives they had stolen turned against them, and the first pillar of the Dominion crumbled in fire and blood. And it was only the beginning. Humanity had never been the strongest, the fastest, or the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. But it had something else. It had defiance. It had a hunger for justice, an unwillingness to kneel, and the sheer, terrifying ability to adapt. The moment we uncovered the truth, the slavers' fate was sealed. One by one, their empire burned. Their fleets were shattered. Their strongholds fell, and their leaders, once untouchable, were dragged from the shadows and forced to answer for their crimes. The lesson was simple: tyranny thrives in silence, but truth is the fire that will always burn it to the ground. And humanity had just begun to light the match. The first disappearance was barely a blip on humanity's radar. The cargo ship Prosperity Dawn had been charting a routine path along the outer edges of the Kuiper Belt, hauling a shipment of rare minerals from a deep space mining station. It sent a routine check-in, its crew laughing about winning a high-stakes card game. Then, minutes later, silence. No distress signal. No wreckage. Just gone. The insurance company wrote it off as a freak accident, an equipment failure, maybe an asteroid strike. But then, it happened again. A scientific research station on the icy moon Emer 4 went dark. No signs of struggle. No last messages. Just abandoned halls, half-eaten meals on tables, and data logs that simply ended as if time had frozen. The disappearances started small: one ship, one outpost, a few dozen people. Isolated incidents, the authorities said. Space was vast and unforgiving, after all. Accidents happened. But the pattern wasn't random. Freelance investigator Elias Vance had spent years analyzing missing ships, tracking anomalies across the edges of human-controlled space. He noticed something the governments didn't or refused to see. Every missing vessel had taken the same flight path. Every lost colony had reported strange sensor readings days before vanishing: glitches, gravitational distortions, phantom signals that didn't belong to any known frequency. Vance wasn't alone. Others had started noticing. Independent journalists, conspiracy theorists, deep space radio operators. They called it the fade. Something was out there, pulling ships and stations into the abyss. Then, one day, a transmission changed everything. A forgotten satellite, drifting beyond Neptune's orbit, picked up a distress signal, faint, fragmented, but unmistakably human. They took us. They've taken thousands. We are not alone. Find the truth, and burn them down. The signal wasn't just a warning. It was a breadcrumb. Encoded in the transmission were coordinates, buried deep in the galactic void, far beyond the reach of any known human expedition. And with it came fragments of data, encrypted manifests, alien ship schematics, something that looked disturbingly like an auction list. The names of missing humans. It was no longer a mystery. It was a crime. And humanity was about to uncover the terrifying truth: they were not the first species to disappear. They were just the latest. The signal arrived like a whisper from the grave. It was an old deep space relay station, a relic from humanity's early expansion beyond the solar system. It had long been abandoned, drifting like a forgotten ghost beyond Neptune's orbit, its systems failing, its solar panels coated in cosmic dust. No one had paid it any attention in years until it caught something it was never meant to hear. At 03:27 Universal Standard Time, the station's ancient receivers locked onto a faint, irregular transmission. At first, it was just static, nothing unusual. Space was filled with random noise, bursts of radiation, and the whispers of dying stars. But then, buried beneath the interference, there was something else. A voice. It was human. Weak. Strained. Desperate. They took us. They've taken thousands. The station's automated system barely had enough power left to log the transmission, let alone decode it. But before its batteries failed, it tagged the signal with coordinates: deep space, far beyond the reach of any known human settlement. It should have been lost forever. But a lone data miner, sifting through old relay archives for forgotten satellite codes, stumbled upon it days later. He ran the garbled transmission through decryption software, enhancing the audio and piecing together fragmented words. "We are not alone. Find the truth and burn them down." It wasn't just a distress call. It was a warning. The data miner sent it to Elias Vance, the same investigator who had been tracking the strange disappearances across human space. Vance analyzed the signal, running it through layer after layer of filtering, stripping away the static. What he found chilled him to the bone. The transmission wasn't from a drifting escape pod or a damaged human ship. It had been intercepted. The faint remnants of an alien encryption algorithm were woven into the background noise, a digital signature belonging to no known species in human records. Someone had tried to erase the message, to scramble it beyond recognition. They had failed. Buried inside the signal were coordinates, a location light years beyond the furthest human exploration zones. And something else. A manifest. A list of names. Vance's heart pounded as he cross-referenced them with missing person reports from the past decade. The matches were undeniable. These were people who had vanished, freighter crews, colonists, entire families whose disappearances had been dismissed as accidents. Someone had been taking them. And if the signal was right, it wasn't just a few lost souls. It was thousands. Vance knew he was holding proof of something terrifying, something that could change everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. He also knew that if the wrong people found out, he'd end up vanishing just like the others. There was only one thing to do. He had to expose the truth. Because if humanity didn't act now, they could be next. The truth wasn't just horrifying, it was an act of war. Elias Vance knew what he had uncovered could shake humanity to its core. Thousands of missing people weren't dead. They weren't lost. They had been taken. Sold like cattle in an intergalactic market that no one on Earth even knew existed. But exposing the truth wouldn't be easy. Vance had enemies now. The moment he decrypted the intercepted signal, his systems were breached. A silent, unseen force had infiltrated his network, erasing logs, corrupting files, shutting down his off-world relays one by one. The encryption he had cracked? Someone else had been watching it too. And they knew he had the data. Vance barely managed to escape before his hideout, a backwater station orbiting Titan, was wiped from existence in what the news later called a reactor malfunction. He knew better. It was a cover-up. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. But they were too late. Vance had already copied the data, splitting it into fragments and sending it to the only people who might listen: independent journalists, black market information brokers, rogue AI networks hidden across the deep web. He wasn't just exposing the truth. He was making sure the whole galaxy heard it. And when humanity finally listened, it was like lighting a fuse. Within days, news networks were flooded with the leaked data. Flight records show ships disappearing along the same deep space corridors. Auction manifests listing humans among other enslaved species. Alien transaction logs where the Earthborn stock had been sold to unknown buyers. Witness accounts from escaped captives, describing brutal conditions in labor camps, gladiatorial death rings, and experiments too monstrous to comprehend. Humanity had always wondered if it was alone in the universe. Now, it wished it had been. The orchestrators of this horror were the Orthac Dominion, an empire of slavers who had ruled the Orion Expanse for millennia. They had taken humans because they thought no one would notice. They thought wrong. The revelation sent shockwaves through Earth. Governments, corporations, and even criminal syndicates put aside their differences overnight. The fragile alliances of Earth's colonies were forgotten. The only thing that mattered now was retribution. The United Earth Fleet declared a state of war. Underground resistance groups began launching raids on suspected slaver outposts. AI-controlled cyber warfare divisions infiltrated Dominion databases, seizing intel on their operations. Mercenary factions and privateers turned their weapons against the slavers, not for money but for revenge. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't fighting itself. It was fighting for something bigger. And the slavers who had once operated in the shadows? They were about to learn what it meant to fear the hunted. The moment the truth broke, the galaxy felt humanity's fury. It started as a roar of outrage, protests erupting across Earth and its colonies, voices demanding immediate action. No more bureaucracy. No more diplomacy. No more waiting. The time for talking was over. This was war. Governments scrambled to respond. The United Earth Council, once slow and divided by politics, now spoke with a single voice. We will not negotiate with slavers. We will not stand by while our people are stolen. We will bring them home. Or we will burn the Orthac Dominion to the ground. For the first time in history, humanity had one enemy. And it would not rest until every last slaver was dead. Humanity's reaction was immediate and merciless. Military fleets, once tied up in petty conflicts, were merged into a single war machine. Corporations, once bitter rivals, diverted their resources to build weapons of vengeance, battlecruisers, cyber warfare drones, orbital strike platforms. Colonial defense forces, once scattered and uncoordinated, became a ruthless resistance, hunting down anyone who profited from the slave trade. Even the criminal underworld joined the fight. Pirate lords, smugglers, and mercenary clans, the same people who once preyed on human settlements, now turned their guns on the slavers. Not for profit. Not for power. But for justice. Because even the most hardened criminals had one rule. We don't deal in flesh. And those who did? They died screaming. The Orthac Dominion was unprepared for what came next. They had enslaved thousands of species before. They had crushed rebellions, wiped out civilizations, and erased entire cultures without hesitation. They had never faced humans. Humans didn't just fight. They adapted. They turned every weakness into a strength. Every loss into a lesson. Every battle into a message. You started this. We will finish it. The first coordinated human assault came in the dead of space, outside an Orthac slave processing hub. It should have been a routine security patrol. Instead, it was a massacre. A fleet of hijacked Dominion ships, their transponders still broadcasting friendly signals, slipped past defenses. By the time the slavers realized the deception, it was too late. The humans were already inside. The attack was swift. Brutal. Surgical. Not a single slaver escaped. And the freed captives? They didn't just run. They joined the fight. Word of humanity's defiance spread like wildfire. For centuries, countless species had suffered in silence, crushed beneath the boot of the Orthac. They had been too afraid to fight back. Until now. Humanity wasn't just rescuing its own. It was starting a revolution. And the slavers? They had no idea that they were already doomed. The Orthac Dominion was ancient, powerful, and overconfident. For millennia, they had operated in the shadows, running their vast slave empire with impunity. They believed themselves untouchable, no species had ever dared to challenge them. The few who tried had been crushed before their voices could even reach the stars. But humanity was different. They didn't beg for diplomacy. They didn't send warnings. They sent fire. The first real strike against the slavers came at Drovok 4, an Orthac processing station orbiting a dying red star. It was a massive installation, a hub where new stock was categorized, broken, and prepared for sale. A place where human lives were reduced to numbers on a ledger. It was meant to be impenetrable. It wasn't. The plan was simple. Brutal. Efficient. Phase 1, a stolen Orthac freighter, packed with cyber warfare drones, drifted toward the station, broadcasting false distress signals. The slavers, arrogant and unafraid, let it dock without question. Phase 2, the drones activated, spreading like a digital virus, hijacking the station's security systems, locking blast doors, and shutting down escape routes. Phase 3, the real attack began. A human strike force, ex-military, mercenaries, former captives hungry for revenge, descended like ghosts, moving through the station with ruthless precision. There was no mercy. The Orthac guards were used to terrified prisoners, not armed, furious humans. The fight was over in minutes. Slavers begged. They offered deals. No one listened. One message was left behind, carved into the metal walls in scorched plasma burns. No more chains. The humans took everything: data logs, transport records, locations of other slave hubs. But most importantly, they freed every captive on the station. And they didn't stop there. Instead of escaping, they armed the freed prisoners. Hundreds of former captives, many from species long thought broken, picked up weapons and made their choice. They would never be slaves again. The destruction of Drovok 4 wasn't just a victory. It was a declaration. A warning to the slavers: the hunted had become the hunters. The attack shattered the illusion of Orthac's dominance. Other enslaved species, long afraid to fight back, began to rise. Underground resistance movements that had been on the verge of collapse now had hope. And the Orthac? They panicked. For the first time in their history, they weren't the ones calling the shots. They were being hunted. And humanity? They were just getting started. The Orthac Dominion was reeling. The destruction of Drovok 4 wasn't just a military defeat, it was a humiliation. Slavers who once walked the galaxy with unchecked arrogance now whispered in fear of the humans who had turned their chains into weapons. But the Orthac were not just slavers. They were conquerors. An empire that had ruled for thousands of years. And they had no intention of letting humanity continue its rebellion. So, they struck back. The Orthac Dominion was reeling. The destruction of Drovok 4 wasn't just a military defeat, it was a humiliation. Slavers who once walked the galaxy with unchecked arrogance now whispered in fear of the humans who had turned their chains into weapons. But the Orthac were not just slavers. They were conquerors. An empire that had ruled for thousands of years. And they had no intention of letting humanity continue its rebellion. So, they struck back. The counterattack came with the brutality of a dying empire desperate to remind the galaxy of its power. Their target was Vega Prime, a thriving human colony known for its advanced shipyards and orbital defenses. The Dominion didn't just want revenge, they wanted to make an example out of humanity. They came in force. 3 Dominion war fleets. Planetary bombardment weapons. Bioweapon payloads designed to liquefy organic matter. The attack was merciless. Before Vega Prime's defense grid could fully activate, the first kinetic strikes rained down rods of metal fired from orbit at near-light speeds, smashing into cities like apocalyptic meteors. Entire districts were leveled in seconds. Then came the atmospheric firebombing, igniting entire continents in flames. Millions died in the first hours. Families burned in their homes. Evacuation ships were shot out of the sky. This wasn't just a battle. It was genocide. But Vega Prime did not die quietly. Before the planetary defenses were fully destroyed, a signal was sent. A distress call. Human fleets, scattered across different systems, rushed to respond. They were outnumbered. Outgunned. Outmatched. But they fought anyway. Against overwhelming firepower, against the sheer scale of the Dominion's war machine, humanity did what it did best: adapted, resisted, and survived. Suicide runs. Pilots rammed their burning ships into Orthac capital vessels, turning wreckage into weapons. Cyber warfare strikes. AI infiltration teams disabled Dominion dreadnoughts mid-battle, forcing them to turn on their fleets. Ground resistance. Civilians, once ordinary miners and engineers, picked up rifles and fought in the burning streets. The battle for Vega Prime lasted 3 days. By the end, the colony was in ruins. Millions were dead. But the Orthac had paid a price. 2 of their war fleets were annihilated. Their best generals were dead. And for the first time, the Dominion had suffered a defeat on a world they expected to burn to ash. They had thought humanity would break. Instead, they had forged something else. Unrelenting, unforgiving, unstoppable rage. On Earth, the great debate raged. The leaders of humanity gathered: soldiers, scholars, scientists, survivors. They had seen war, they had delivered vengeance, and now, they had a choice to make. Would they rule the galaxy? Would they watch from the shadows? Would they step away and let the galaxy heal? In the end, humanity chose something else entirely. They would not conquer. They would not disappear. Instead, they would stand guard. Not as rulers. Not as tyrants. But as watchers. Protectors. The last line of defense against those who would bring back the darkness. The Phantom Fleet did not disband. It did not fade away. It simply became the legend that all feared and all hoped would never be needed again. The remnants of the Dominion had been erased. The slaver syndicates had been hunted to extinction. And across the stars, a new era began. For the first time in history, civilizations rose without the shadow of slavery looming over them. The stars were free. Because humanity had made them that way. And every world knew the unspoken truth. If the chains ever returned, so would humanity. And this time, they wouldn't leave anything behind. One final message was sent from the Phantom Fleet, a simple beacon pulsing through the dark. The war is over. The slavers are gone. But the stars will always have shadows. If you bring them back, we will return. And we will finish what we started. Then, silence. The fleets vanished. The weapons dimmed. And humanity stepped back from the flames of war, leaving only their legend behind. The legend of the species that would never kneel. The species that burned an empire to dust. The species that freed the stars. Humanity has changed the galaxy forever, but what happens next? Will new threats emerge? Will the Phantom Fleet return? The future is yours to decide. Speech balloon, comment your thoughts. What should humanity's next move be? Rule, retreat, or prepare for the unknown? Fire subscribe to Galactic Humanity. If you love epic sci-fi, deep lore, and thrilling space adventures, hit like and subscribe for more. Bell turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. The stars are free, but for how long? Stay tuned. Milky Way Fire.